Like and subscribe right now, or this will be in your bed tonight. Hello and welcome back to ProRevenge. Before we start, please scroll down and click like and subscribe. This means that you will get more videos from me. Please like and subscribe with notifications on, and it will really make my day. Thanks. The guy in the suit who doesn't know anything. A few years ago, I had the misfortune to work for a truly dysfunctional boss at a Macronich company that provided training for a certain group of professionals that had to do continuous training. If I mentioned the group, you would know the company, so I won't. I was the senior technical lead for a certain application, so I worked with every department in the company. Anyway, this company was owned by a guy that happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right product and was successful in spite of himself. Since he thought that he was a genius, and he wasn't, of course he packed the company with a whole crew of equally mindless idiots. Think minions on steroids. But the crown jewel was the sales team. These were the quintessential narcissist who would take a 2-hour lunch with all the sales buddy and boss and have 3 martinis and a couple lines of a certain illegal substance. The one star of the bunch was the bane of my existence. While I was there, he would call and demand that I stop what I was doing and fix all of his problems while he was on the phone. Half the time he would call me later and cuss me out for doing the opposite of what he demanded. I didn't, but he couldn't remember since he was drunk. I finally resorted to tell him to send me in an email that explicitly stated what he wanted done. That way I could prioritize his tasks and have proof of exactly what he asked for. However, 5 minutes after he sent the email, he would call me and demand that I stop what I was doing and fix his problems. Since we were in a sales-oriented company, complaining to the boss didn't do any good. All I got was just make him happy so he doesn't complain to the owner. Thanks, boss. Now comes the revenge. I finally had enough. I was looking for a job anyway, and I was underpaid, so I wasn't worried about any blowback. Whenever something broke and he demanded an immediate explanation, I started using Star Trek technobabble. Yeah, that report broke because the Heisenberg compensator blew back through the subspace conduit. Sorry, that user couldn't access the system because a dilithium warp router needed to be hooked up to the Jeffers tube. He bought it all. And then comes the best part. I found out the best part after left the company. He repeated everything I told him to his clients, word for word. They just thanked him for the information and he went on his way. And then they laughed after he hung up the phone. It didn't change anything because even before this, their nickname for him was the guy in the suit who doesn't know anything. Revenge on the lowlife landlord who first deprived us of heat and later kept our security deposit. I responded to this post https://red.e243q0 and had a mini blow up with many encouraging me to repost it here. So here it is. I was a kid back in the 80s, 2 years out of college, when I moved into an apartment by the shore in NJ. When the cold weather arrived, there was always a few days when the apartment was cold. We would tell the super, and then the heat would start arriving. One year the heat started decreasing in February, and inside the apartment was like in the 50s, and we had to start wearing coats. We told the super about it and nothing happened this time. We wrote the landlord about it, and still nothing. So we checked with an attorney and learned about warranty of habitability and withholding of rents. So yet another certified letter to the landlord, and we start withholding rents. He files a motion to evict us, and we answer with the Merony defense, depositing the withheld monies with the court. The judge finds in our favor for all the money with withheld. We continue to live there because there just aren't many other options as we save for a home. Flash forward to living there for 6 years on the last lease. Because we are about to buy a home, we write in a clause that we can break the lease with 45 days notice in writing, similar to his 45-day clause. They don't notice it because it's slightly obscured on the top left of page 2, so they sign off on it and return it to me. So in the middle of the lease, we give the 45-day written notice, make the rent payments, and leave. They don't return our deposit, so we sue for it, demanding double. They sue us for the remainderment of the 6 months rent and refuse to return our security deposit. This is no longer small claims court, but we proceed without an attorney anyway. They are expensive. We arrive at the courthouse and court forces a round of arbitration. The arbitrator says we will lose in front of the judge and to pay the rent remainderments. We refuse and wait for the judge. While waiting, the landlord's attorney drops by and asks why we didn't take the arbitrator's advice. So we tell him about the clause we wrote in, and he states he saw it too, and that since it was crossed out, it's not part of the deal. We show him our copy of the lease, where it's not crossed out, and his face goes white as a sheet. He makes a call to the landlord, who then offers to properly break the lease with no penalty and return our security deposit in full. We refuse, and we show him the certified letter stating that we would have accepted that deal up until yesterday, but that if you force us to come down to court, we want double damages of the improper withholding of the security deposit. He tries again to reach out to the landlord, but no luck this time. We go to see the judge. He looks at both leases and calls their attorney to the bench. The judge takes our lease and thrusts it toward their attorney and says, "This is the lease in force." Their attorney starts walking around the courtroom like a chick with his head cut off, while I try to laugh as quietly as possible. The judge finds for us for double damages. We receive nothing for a week, and I go back to the courthouse, where the clerk says they should pay that judgment immediately, and tells us about chattel execution, and gives us that form. A couple of weeks pass, and a check appears from the landlord. Another month passes, and we get a call from the court. They have our money. I told them the landlord had sent a check a while back, so all it good. She tells us that we should have informed the court that we got the money to stop the chattel execution from occurring. The court sent the sheriff to their offices and confiscated office equipment and sold it at auction to satisfy the judgment. They said don't worry, they will just return the money to the landlord. That is the revenge, getting the money and having them experience the abrupt seizing of their assets at their place of business, having it sold at auction, and then having the money returned to them. Major pro-justice. Edit. Added paragraph breaks as suggested. Edit 2. Added context of it being a repost of my ok elsewhere. Dad gets fired for BS reasons. Plays the long game. Ends up in charge. Takes the extended family on a cruise. My dad had worked at the same company for almost 30 years before he was abruptly fired for complete bullshit. He was coordinating an upcoming meeting of people who had to fly in from around the country. One important participant resigned unexpectedly, so Dad cancelled the meeting via email and explained why. Apparently that counted as improperly communicating privileged information, and he was fired the next day. All this happened a week after Dad's boss retired and was replaced by a new guy who wanted to cut costs. What a coincidence. This was about 10 years ago, near the height of the recession. Dad was in his 50s, hadn't interviewed for a job since the early 1980s. He wasn't sure he'd ever find another job. My mom went back to work at a school to pay the bills, while Dad scraped together what he could doing some shitty online consulting gigs for basically minimum wage. They managed to keep their heads above water, but only barely. Dad was out of work for a year and a half. He finally landed a job at a new company 3 states away, coincidentally about an hour away from where my wife and I lived, and were expecting Dad's first grandchild. Mom and Dad moved to live about 20 minutes away from us. They had paid off the mortgage on their house, so they decided to keep it and rent it out, planning to retire there in a few years. New company treated Dad very well. Better salary than he'd made at old company, good benefits, and respect from his co-workers and superiors. A year later, Mom and Dad were able to buy a second, smaller house near their grandkids. Dad mentioned a few things about his time at old company to his new bosses. Nothing confidential or anything, more like overall strengths and weaknesses. Of course, the story of how he got fired came out as well. It turns out that when you work at a company for over 25 years you learn a thing or two about how it works, and cutting costs by firing experienced employees can make your company vulnerable. New company started to get very interested. They saw an important business opportunity and also a chance to get revenge on behalf of a valued employee. A couple years later, new company bought old company. They were both big companies, and mergers of this size take time. But when the dust settled it was clear there were redundancies, divisions and products that both companies had that new company only needed one of. They kept as many of old company's people as they could, and very few lost their jobs. Except, of course, for the people responsible for firing dad. New company put dad in charge of the building he used to work in at old company and let him choose his employees from both old and new companies. Dad had to move back to the old state, so new company helped sell his house in the new state and gave him a moving stipend of several $1,000s. But mom and dad were just moving back into their own house. They sold their new house that they'd made payments and improvements on for 5 years for a nice profit. With that money plus the moving stipend, they paid off debts, saved for retirement, and took me, my siblings, our spouses, and the grandkids on a cruise. Edit. Since people are asking, I never heard exactly what transpired when the guy who fired dad got downsized. But, since it's Christmas, I'm actually able to just ask him. Dad wouldn't say. Exit interviews are supposed to stay private. I told him about this post, with all the names left out, and that people wanted to know. He just grinned and said that would be improperly communicating privileged information. Thank you all for watching to the end of the video. But before you go, please like and subscribe for more. Not many of you at all that watch are subscribed or like the video, and this makes me unsure if I should continue to make more content or not. So if you want more content, please like and subscribe. If you don't want to miss out on any future videos, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button. Also, please give me some feedback in the comments section about what I can do better, because not many people comment on my videos, so I have no idea of people's opinions of thoughts about this YouTube channel. So yeah, that's all from me. If you have subscribed and liked the video, please consider sharing the video with your friends. Thanks and bye. I'm still doing daily uploads, so hope to see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.